I've lived next door to my niece for 30 years. From her first steps to her teenage tantrums, I was always there. I never missed a recital, a birthday, or a late-night crisis call. She called me Auntie, but sometimes I think she forgot that word meant loyalty, not convenience. 3 months ago, my life changed. A sudden illness confined me to a wheelchair. The world seemed smaller at first, narrower, like the doorways in our old neighborhood homes. But I refused to shrink myself. I still hosted tea in my modest living room, still baked the cardamom biscuits she loved, still remembered every prayer and every story her mother told us as children. And then came the wedding invitation. I waited for her call, expecting warmth, perhaps a few instructions. Instead, I heard her voice, polished, sharp, distant. Auntie, I need to tell you something. You can't bring the wheelchair. If you bring it, I'm sorry, but you won't be able to attend. I paused. My chest tightened, my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. Excuse me? I said, my voice calm but incredulous. I'm serious. It's a small venue. The focus of the day has to be on me. No distractions. I swallowed hard, forcing a polite laugh. I see. Well, thank you for letting me know. And that was it. No apology, no hesitation, no acknowledgement of the years of love and care. Just a rule, a brick wall she expected me to respect. I spent that night thinking of her wedding. The bright colors, the music, the vows. I thought of the little girl who used to climb onto my lap for bedtime stories, the teenager who used to cry over broken friendships, the woman I watched grow into someone I was proud of. And I realized something cold but true. Her wedding was never about love. It was about control. The next morning, I made my decision. I would stay home, yes, but I would not disappear. My presence, my history, my role in this family would speak louder than any chair. I called my cousin, who was helping with the seating arrangements. Just so you know, I said, with deliberate calm, Andy can't come. But everyone knows why. There was a pause, then a low, almost whispered acknowledgement. They all know? Yes, I said, soft but steady. And they will remember. As the wedding began, I sat by the window in my home, watching the decorations through the glass. The chairs were lined perfectly. The flowers glowed in the morning sun. The photographer buzzed around, eager to catch every smile. But I knew a secret they didn't. Every whispered complaint, every raised eyebrow about the no-wheelchair aunt was a ripple in her carefully curated pond. I wasn't there physically, but my presence, my history, my bond with the family cast a shadow over her day. The cousins who had grown up with me whispered stories of my sacrifices. The neighbors who had seen her as a child spoke of my devotion. In every smile she sought to command, there was a reminder. She wasn't the first, she wasn't the only, and she could not erase me. By the time the ceremony reached the vows, I received texts, short, careful, nervous. Did Auntie really not come? Everyone is talking. She's everywhere, Auntie, even if she's not there. I didn't reply immediately. I sipped my tea, watching the sun strike the tiles of my veranda. The warmth reminded me of countless afternoons spent with her, her small hands in mine, learning to tie her shoelaces, comforting her after childhood disappointments. And I let the truth settle like a shadow across her perfect day. Later, my sister called. Mishtory, you did this? Her voice was trembling, a mix of awe and something heavier, something I recognized. Respect. Yes, I said quietly. Someone had to remind her. Weddings are for love, not control. Family is forever, not the story you want to tell for a few hours. She sighed, the sound long and full of unspoken histories. She'll learn, Mishtory, even if it takes a lifetime. And in that moment, I felt the quiet justice of decades lived, of loyalty unbroken, of love unbending. I had done nothing rash, nothing loud. I had simply existed as the truth she refused to see. Later, when I sit by the garden in the evenings, the jasmine climbing along the fence, I think of the little girl who once ran into my arms, and I know she would understand. If only she remembered. The focus wasn't on her, because it never could be, not when the heart of her family was larger than any narrative she wanted to spin. Some wounds are quiet but deep. Some lessons are silent but lasting. And some victories are simply being the person who always stood by them, even when they tried to erase you. By mid-afternoon, the texts kept coming. I didn't need to look at my phone to know the bride was unraveling. Her plan, so meticulously crafted, was crumbling in ways she couldn't control. Auntie Mizira didn't come, and everyone noticed. One cousin wrote, "She's talking about you," another added carefully. I sat in my living room, the aroma of freshly brewed tea mingling with the faint scent of jasmine from the garden. I felt no triumph, no glee, only a quiet satisfaction. Decades of care, decades of presence, weren't erased by a wedding invitation or a single, cruel rule. Later, my neighbor, who had attended the ceremony, came to the gate. She hesitated, then whispered, "Mizira, the whole village is buzzing." No one could believe she did that. No wheelchair? Everyone knew what that meant. Everyone remembers who you are. I nodded, taking the words in. Sometimes, just being remembered is enough, I said calmly. Meanwhile, inside the wedding hall, chaos quietly spread. The bride, dressed in her flowing gown, expected the eyes of the family and friends to be fixed entirely on her. Instead, she felt the subtle but persistent murmurs, the stolen glances, the polite yet pointed conversations that hinted at a truth she had tried to bury, that her aunt, the woman who had been her rock since childhood, was absent, not by choice, but because of her own rule. At one point, I heard from a distant cousin, "She's upset, she can't control it." Every time she smiles for the camera, someone whispers about Auntie Mizira. The whole hall feels different. I smiled quietly to myself. Not with malice, but with the serenity of someone who had seen life from all angles. The joys, the disappointments, the small injustices that never deserved to define the moment. Later in the day, my sister called again. Her voice was soft, almost tender, but laced with the kind of awe that comes from witnessing quiet justice. "Mizira, she's asking questions." Not loudly, not in anger, but she paused, searching for the words. "She's realizing she overstepped. Everyone is talking about it. About you. About what you meant to her. What you always meant. And she doesn't like it." I took a slow breath, watching the sunlight shift across the veranda. "I never needed her to like it," I said. "I only needed her to know the truth." By evening, the bride's carefully constructed world began to crack. Family members whispered stories, small moments she had forgotten, the nights I had stayed up with her, the illnesses I had nursed, the countless times I had sacrificed so she could shine. The whispers were gentle but persistent, like water eroding stone. One aunt, standing near the buffet, said aloud with a careful tone, "It's strange, isn't it? How someone who isn't even here can hold the room's attention more than anyone else." And there it was, spoken in polite words but heavy with truth. Her plan to monopolize the spotlight failed because family memory cannot be silenced. Loyalty, history, and decades of love are stronger than any rule or attempt to control attention. Later, I received a call from my niece herself. My heart fluttered for a moment, thinking she might apologize, or maybe finally acknowledge my years of support. But instead, her voice was tight, formal, almost brittle. "Auntie, I see you weren't there. You stayed home. But everyone noticed." "Yes," I said softly, letting my calm voice carry more weight than anger ever could. "And I hope you understand why." There was a pause, long and uncomfortable. Then, almost like a whisper, she said, I think I was wrong." I didn't respond immediately. Decades of love, patience, and presence couldn't be undone with a single sentence. But I let her feel the gravity of it. "It's never too late to learn," I said finally. After we hung up, I sat in the twilight, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood. The jasmine scent was stronger now, and I felt a calm satisfaction. I hadn't crashed her wedding, shouted at her, or caused a scene. I had simply existed as the truth she tried to deny. By nightfall, the family began to disperse. The bride, exhausted and overwhelmed, realized that the stories, the memories, and the respect others had for me could not be erased. She had sought to control the narrative, but the narrative had its own life, independent of her wishes. And in the quiet of my home, I reflected on the lessons learned, not just for her, but for all of us, that love, loyalty, and presence cannot be silenced by rules or stubbornness, that family is forever, even when some try to twist it, and that the smallest acts of injustice can sometimes create the largest, quietest victories. Later, lying in bed, I whispered to myself, "Job done. The lesson is clear. Family is everything. The rest fades away." The bride had her wedding. She had the dress, the flowers, the music. But she did not have the one thing she wanted most: to control the story, to make the day all about her. That belonged, quietly, to the woman who had stood by her for 30 years, the aunt she tried to erase but could not. And as I drifted to sleep, I realized that this calm, unshakable truth was the greatest revenge of all. Not anger, not drama, not confrontation. Simply being remembered, simply being respected, simply being unwavering. Because weddings end, dresses are packed away, music fades. But family, and the truth of family, is forever. The days after the wedding were telling. The bride had her pictures, her perfect dress, and her meticulously planned music. But she didn't have the narrative she wanted. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. Not in cruelty, but in quiet acknowledgement of a truth she had tried to bury, that loyalty, love, and history cannot be erased by rules or whims. I stayed home, as I had intended. My wheelchair didn't limit me. It never had. I moved slowly through the house, tending to the jasmine in my garden, listening to the distant laughter and stories floating from the wedding hall, now cleared of all its chaos. And yet, even in absence, I felt the subtle shift, the recognition, the respect, the realization of decades spent standing by a family who sometimes forgot my presence. A call came from a younger cousin, tentative, almost afraid. "Annie, she keeps asking about you. About how you've always been here. How you've done everything." I smiled quietly, sipping my tea. "And that's all she needs to know," I said. It wasn't revenge in the loud sense. There were no confrontations, no shouting matches, no dramatic exposure. It was quieter, slower, and far more powerful. The family understood. They remembered. And the bride, though she didn't admit it, felt the weight of her own actions. Later that evening, my sister visited. She placed her hand over mine, soft but firm. "Mizira, you've done what she couldn't. You've shown her, without a word, who really matters. Family, it's forever." You reminded her. "Yes," I whispered. "Sometimes that's all one can do. The rest is up to them." I thought back to every bedtime story, every shared secret, every night I stayed awake listening to her fears. The strength of those small, unseen acts now resonated like a quiet echo across the family. It was enough to shift the focus, enough to show that control cannot overwrite history. And in that quiet, I understood something deeply important. Revenge isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about presence, about standing firm in truth, about letting someone realize in their own time the consequences of their choices. Weeks later, the bride called. Her voice was softer now, more reflective. "Auntie, I didn't understand. I see now. I was wrong." I let the words linger, heavy with years of love and patience. "It's never too late to learn," I said. That was enough. No anger, no resentment, just quiet dignity and the knowledge that I had done what needed to be done. The wedding day was hers, but the story of the family, the truth of who had always been there, remained mine. As I watched the sun set over my garden, the jasmine scent filling the air, I felt peace. The lesson was clear. Family, love, and loyalty outlast any wedding, any dress, any fleeting moment of control. The bride had learned it, quietly and indelibly, and that was my victory. Because some victories don't shout. They endure. And some lessons, no matter how late, last forever.